Hello, I'm Lueny Morell, Provost and Chief Academic Officer of New Engineering University, a partnership with the University of New Haven. And I'm going to be talking today about competencies and how can they be developed and measured. I define competencies as the sum of knowledge, skills, attitudes, and values. Many people define competencies in different ways, but I think it's the combination of three that help design curricula in a better way. Knowledge. What is the definition of knowledge? Facts, information, and skills acquired by a person. It's understanding, comprehension, grasping information, mastery. It also is the familiarity gained by experience of a fact or situation, the consciousness, the realization that the cognition about something, about some topic. What is a skill? A skill is an ability to do something. If you have knowledge, and you're able to use that knowledge, then you have a skill, you have an ability to do something. And then an attitude is related to the person's way of thinking, the posture, the stance, the perspective that a person has, the values that the person has towards something. And a value, which is somehow related to attitude, is, for example, the ability or the importance or the worth that a person assigns to a different idea or concept. So all these four are very important in curriculum development. And why is that? Because these three or four, if you might want to call them, the knowledge, the skills, the value, and the attitudes that a person has, provides the individual with what we call a T-shaped professional. That is, he or she knows something in depth, for example, engineering or mathematics or physics, but then it also provides these four, this definition of competencies provides the breadth that allows the individual to use that knowledge in different perspectives, in different situations, and also defines the intra and interpersonal relationships that the person has in professional and personal settings. Competencies should be developed in curricula in a transversal way. In other words, don't wait until the last year of the curriculum to develop these. They should be developed across the whole curricula, much in a way that knowledge or concepts are developed. So how to do that? How to develop these competencies into the curriculum? Number one should define the learning competencies. What is the knowledge that the student should learn? What are the skills? What is the student be able to do with the knowledge learned? And what are the skills and the attitudes and values that the students should develop in order to be a complete and educated professional? The second step is plan the learning process. So you need to understand what are the learning instances, the learning activities, the classroom activities, the out-of-classroom activities that will allow students to acquire the knowledge, develop the skills, and practice the skills, as well as develop the right attitudes and values towards the interpersonal and interpersonal relationships with others. The third step is measuring outcomes. Measuring, collecting the data, to understand if the students learned, and analyzing them to see if they learn to the level that you aspire in developing in them. The fourth step would be to share and discuss the results and make decisions finally for re-engineering or reforming or continuously improving the learning process. This framework that I have just shared with you, it's what it's called a continuous quality improvement framework that encompasses the whole the establishing of goals, planning the learning process, measuring outcomes, discussing the outcomes, and then re-engineering. One might ask, well, what knowledge should a curricula develop in students? Well, I would say traditional. You know, if you're in engineering, civil engineering, chemical engineering, if you're in the arts, then you could talk about humanities, you could talk about social sciences, but society needs other stuff too. What other stuffs? Other knowledge. I think the best thing is to think about what students are motivated with, what society needs, and thirdly, what employers need. The intersection of the three will drive the thinking of what kind of knowledge we should be teaching in our programs. One might ask, what skills, attitudes, and values, what are those? What kind of skills do we need to develop in our students? Well, there's many sources around. If you Google, you will find, for example, this survey of the employers' opinions on engineering competencies. And as you can see here in this slide, you will see that it includes not only knowledge in these competencies, but also skills and attitudes that we should develop in engineering students. So all together would be the competencies needed. And also you can notice in this chart that skills and values and attitudes compose a large number of items in this list, which is very meaningful. Sometimes in academia, or oftentimes in academia, we think that just developing knowledge is enough. And employers are pointing and telling us more and more that we have to go beyond knowledge and technical knowledge, for example, in engineering. There's other sources of competencies. This is an excellent one that I love to share. This is a publication by the Institute for the Future in Palo Alto, California, where they do forecasting of future. In this case, they have forecasted what kind of leaders will make the future in technology. And they, Professor Bob Johansen outlines things like mobility, the ability to work in large groups, influencing, the ability to be persuasive in multiple social contexts and media spaces, protovation, fearless innovation, emergent sight, ability to prepare and handle surprising results and complexity, and cooperation radar, for example, the ability to sense what would make the best collaborators. So we need to be conscious of these kinds of competencies in order to be to consider them in developing our curricula. Then you have to plan, as I mentioned before, how to plan to develop these transversally across the curriculum. So I would suggest that I use often a matrix of competencies to sort of roadmap the whole program or the whole learning activities throughout the curriculum, so that at the end of the curriculum, the student will acquire the expected knowledge, develop the skills, competencies, etc. that we plan. And then determine what teaching and learning strategies. I will show here in this graph a matrix like the one I'm mentioning. This is in particular for my university, where we have here on the first column, I have the learning activities, the courses and practicum and projects, etc., that the students will be taking across the curriculum. And on the above, all the learning outcomes. For example, design, big data challenges, work in multidisciplinary, multi-stakeholder teams, communicate effectively, etc. And in the center, you would see the level of depth that the learning will take place. So where the learning will take place is very important in this process, because you need to understand that learning skills and developing the attitudes and values that you plan cannot be done in a regular classroom. So you need to provide an environment that will facilitate the learning process. So you have to understand that students learn more when they are intensively involved in their education. And so collaborating with others, with solving problems, dealing with uncertainty, more than one solution in their hands, where they have to determine or choose the best solution given the constraints. That's a much better environment for learning that, you know, the traditional plug and chalk and repeating and doing the same thing all over and over. So you need to incorporate in the teaching learning environments new strategies like active learning. You have to motivate students to learn. You have to put them into working teams. You have to make them present their solutions, and you have to ask them to address real issues and problems. You have to design learning spaces that allow for collaboration. A room full of chairs is not, you know, line chairs is not the best environment, so maybe tables. You have to think yourself as a catalyst, as a mentor, not a god in the classroom. You have to provide for internships and outside of classroom experiences, bringing real life projects. You have to bring outside mentors to the classroom. So a lot of other experiences that what we do today. And then finally, how do you assess competencies? Well, we all know how to assess learning concepts, knowledge, quizzes and exams and homework. But how about the others? How do you evaluate teamwork? How do you evaluate a good oral presentation? Well, you have to define a tool or find a tool that would allow the professor and the students and perhaps third parties like industry mentors to be able to evaluate the student learning. And so you have to plan where, when, who will be completing these tools. You have to plan when are you going to collect these tools, and also who is responsible to collect. This example here is one I'm using for my university. So we have the assessment tool on the first column, and we will, for example, how to evaluate ethics learning and networking and report writing, etc. Here are some examples of the tools. These, of course, are in paper form, but we will put them in digital form so that we can collect and analyze information more readily and effectively. So all in all, I have given you sort of a recipe of what are competencies, how can you develop them and plan to integrate them, that development in the curriculum, and then a way of assessing if students have learned the knowledge and have developed the skills, the values, and the attitudes. So in that way, we will be providing an education that is not only based on facts and learning a lot and memorization. We're going to be training the mind to think way beyond from what is in the books, like Albert Einstein just says. Thank you very much for your attention. Hope you enjoyed this talk.